This piece right here is now bent. I don't know if that's actually gonna matter or not, but I didn't really expect it. So this actually didn't work. Oh my gosh, come on. Whoa. This might have been a bad idea. Think back with me. When you were a kid, there was a toy or a group of toys that you absolutely loved. The thing that just gave you joy every time you saw it or played with it. Or maybe it was a movie or a show that you wanted to watch over and over and over because you just loved the way it looked and it made you look at things differently. When you think about those things, the feeling that you get is nostalgia, and I love it. Well, I spend a lot of time making things that give me that feeling. Or making furniture to display stuff that gives me that feeling. Personally, I think it's super important to surround yourself with stuff that has influenced you and things that inspire you, but sometimes those things are kind of hard to display. Some of these things are really small, and if you stack a whole bunch of them up on a deep shelf, you won't actually see any of them. So I came up with kind of a destructive solution for this. First thing we need to do is cut a hole in my door. So hollow core doors are interesting. Obviously they're hollow, but I expected there to be a little bit more inside than there is. There's not very much. This might have been a bad idea. I don't know if you can really see it, but this piece right here is now bent. It's not straight across, and if I put a straight edge across, you can see there's like a high spot here, and then it bends away from it. So I don't know if that's actually gonna matter or not, but I didn't really expect it. But regardless, I think it'll be okay. I haven't told you what the plan is. Behind me is my shop. Right there is a bathroom. Right behind you is the rest of my basement. This is the door that goes into my shop, and honestly, it's left open most of the time. And so I thought, why not use it? I decided to cut a hole in the door, and instead of putting in a window there, like you would in a lot of places, I'm gonna put in a really thin display case. And this would actually be a perfect depth for Hot Wheels or minifigs or action figures, anything that just needs to be kind of one depth and not stacked up on a shelf. Now, because I'm me, I did go into Fusion 360 and actually model the door and model the opening and modeled the shelves, basically just to make sure that it would fit and to figure out how many shelves I could fit in here. But I'm not really gonna go by the model. I just wanted to make sure that it would work and kind of visualize it, which is a great thing to use Fusion for, but I'm actually gonna just build it in place. And the first thing we need is a new interior frame to strengthen this thing up. Okay, so my original idea was to make an MDF frame that would go in this opening, would have some shelves across it, and then would have a solid back. So you'd really only be able to see it from this side. But now that I've got it here, I think it might need lights in it. And to do that, the sides need to allow light to come through because it's not gonna shine down. So I think I have to do the sides out of acrylic instead, I guess. My plan is changing in real time. Man, I can complicate anything. But basically, here's what I think we're gonna do. Keep MDF for the bottom, and then the sides are gonna be a piece of kind of thicker acrylic or plexiglass or whatever I can find. And then on the back side of that, hidden in the door, is gonna be a black surface with some LEDs on top of it, so the LEDs will shine through that from each side into the stuff that's in the middle. Plus, each one of the shelves is gonna be acrylic, so that edge light should light the shelves too. I think it's gonna look really cool, and if the lights don't work, you're still gonna have plenty of light from the room that's gonna shine on the front of it, so it'll look good either way. The only real question is about getting power into the door, but luckily, like I said, this door doesn't really open and close very much, so having a power cord plug into the back of a door is not a big deal, although it's kind of weird. I've got like a stash of LEDs that I didn't use from before. This is actually a rigid under cabinet LED strip, and it's in pieces, so you can snap them together and chain as many as you need to. And it turns out that 3 of these is actually the perfect height and thickness to put inside this door. And I've got enough of these that I can put them on both sides and plug them into the same outlet. So I'm gonna try to actually cut this wire, put a port in the back side of the door so I can plug the door in when I need it, and if not, I can unplug it and everything will be fine. I'm gonna mount these on the inside, and then once I get them mounted, we'll see if it's enough light or too much light or whatever. Because I put the LEDs in the sides, I have to make the side panels clear so that light can come through. But those side panels also need to be thick enough to hold shelves. I need to have little tiny dados in them so that I can put acrylic shelves in between them. So I've got some 1/4" material here, some plexiglass that I'm gonna use. I'm gonna cut strips for each side and then go back and cut little dados in them so that I have a place to put the shelves. One thing I did want to mention, you absolutely can cut acrylic with a regular table saw blade. And it works, but it just kind of like breaks off little pieces and sometimes the edges chip out. So at one point I ended up buying a plexiglass and plastic blade. It has much finer teeth and it makes a huge difference when you're cutting this stuff. You get a much better finish, and even though it's a little bit of an expensive blade, it is worth the cost and it's worth the time that it takes to swap it out when you want to cut a bunch. Most acrylics come with a protective covering on them. This one happens to be white, usually it's clear. But you can see that the acrylic is very clear. I'm gonna make it frosted just by sanding the back side of it. This is the easiest way to do it. You don't have to worry about using chemicals to try to frost it or add something to it, just sand it. Now that I've got all 4 sides of this thing, I need to lock it in place. I'm gonna be gluing it to this surface, which wouldn't really hold it, but eventually we're gonna have a frame on the front and the back that actually is gonna keep everything in place. For now, I just need to make sure it fits. While I'm doing that, I also wanted to tell you about Orange Friday, which was actually yesterday, but the deal goes through this Monday. Orange Friday is when we give 25% off everything that we sell. All of our digital plans, all of our merch, all of our online courses, everything is 25% off using the code OrangeFriday25. Now this is a great chance for you to get some plans to build some stuff, or maybe give an online course as a gift to somebody in your life. Whatever you're gonna do with it, it's a great time of year to get a really good deal on all the stuff that we sell, and we would really appreciate it. So if any of that is interesting to you, go to ILikeToMakeStuff.com, use the code OrangeFriday25 between now and Monday, and you'll get 25% off everything. Thanks for the support, we really appreciate it. Let's see how these look. It looks really nice, actually. It's a good amount of light. I think it's gonna spread across inside the frame really well. You can still see the individual LEDs if you're looking directly at them, but it's not really a big deal. Plus, they're right up against the back of the plexi. And to have really good diffusion, you actually need a little bit of a gap in there so the light can spread. Can't do that here, and it's not a big deal. But next up, we need to make a back to actually cover this up so we can start to build the inside of the case. Okay, for the back panel, I'm gonna use a piece of 1/8" MDF just because I have a big scrap of it, but what I actually wanted to use was some of that whiteboard material. You can get a full 4x8 sheet of it for like 13 bucks, and it's brown on one side, but whiteboard material on the other side, and that would be great for the back of a door, because then you have a built-in whiteboard. But I don't wanna spend money on it, so I'm just gonna use this. World is happening. Whoa. Guess I can get that tight enough. Now this panel can just go onto the back of the door, and then we're gonna cover up the edges with this trim. It's kind of a general purpose PVC trim. It's real flexible, easy to cut, and cheap. So I'm just gonna wrap it around the outside of this, miter the corners, and then just like stick it on the back of the door. It'll look good. Okay, so it's starting to come together. I think it turned out really well. I need to paint it though. It needs to have a kind of, not bright color, but like a bold color on the back so that everything on it that's lit will be standing out. So I'm gonna paint that. But next up, I actually need to work on the shelves. Those shelves have to fit in these little dados. They have to be really shallow and really long. So there's kind of a problem there, but I think I have a solution to make them strong enough over a span like this. This is the material I'm going to use. It's pretty thin, pretty flexible. It's less than 1/8 of an inch. And once you cut it into strips, it actually gets a lot more flexible and would totally not work by itself in this situation. But once you glue the two pieces together in different orientations, they make a T, kind of like an I-beam or a T-beam or whatever, and it's a lot stronger. This piece is more than strong enough to span the entire thing, even with a little bit of weight on it, and these figures are actually really light. So I have to cut a whole bunch of strips, and then we can talk about gluing them together. Now, the only downside of using the blade that's made especially for acrylics and plastics is that it's super messy. It makes these fine little fuzzy things that fly all over you and get in your pockets and everything, so it's kind of annoying. But if you use a regular blade, then it just shoots sharp, hot pieces of plastic at you. So it's a trade-off. This is with dust collection on, so, you know. Now you could use CA glue or super glue to actually glue these pieces together and it would work, but it's basically filling the space in between two pieces of plastic. This acrylic cement is thinner than water, so it fills every tiny little gap, and instead of just gluing them together, it actually chemically bonds them together so they become one piece. It's fast and it's much stronger. I did mess a couple of these up, and I wanted to point out why, because it kind of like wastes a piece. Basically, because it's clear, if you get the acrylic cement on any of the surfaces that you want to stay clear, they kind of cloud it up and you can see where it goes. You have to be really careful about just getting it in the joint. Especially once you start adding light to the outside of it, all of those imperfections really pop out and it just looks bad. I tried sanding one of them just to kind of evenly diffuse it. It didn't look very good. I tried painting one of them white. It looked all right, but not great. So I think I'm just gonna have to be really careful. These things actually fit super well and they turned out pretty good. I just have to be really careful to make sure that I get all of the little particles and the dust in the acrylic pieces because they really show up once you get light on them. So now that I've got the shelves in place, I need to figure out how to get the figures to actually stand on them. So I need to make some individual stands or some stands that can hold a bunch of figures at once. I've got two ideas. So the two ideas are 3D printing and laser cutting, basically. I went into Fusion and modeled up a little stand for the figures to go on. I measured the bottom of the hole in their foot and then figured out exactly how to make it fit really well, and this works great for one figure. But I've got 7 shelves that are about 27 inches wide, so 3D printing these would take a really long time. At first, using a laser cutter was not even on my radar for this because I needed a little post for the figure to actually stand on. Then I remembered that at one point I had to buy a whole bunch of acrylic rods, and it turns out that these rods are actually the same size as the hole on the bottom of the foot. So with a little bit of testing, I figured out the exact size hole that I need to cut in a flat piece of acrylic so I can put this little post in it and then use it as a stand. And to do that, I have to cut a whole bunch of these and then cut a bunch of these into tiny pieces and glue them together. So this didn't work. The laser melts the end of the acrylic, which is what you want, but it also kind of like mushrooms it out and it messed up my tolerances. So all of these little pieces are just slightly too big to go into the hole. Oh my gosh, come on. Luckily, I think I can do the exact same thing at the bandsaw and they'll probably fit just fine. That worked way better. So I still gotta use the adhesive to bond all these pieces together and do the other 13, and then I can actually start putting the figures in the case. Finally got all the stands done, and they actually look fantastic. But before I put these in there, I've got to have a way to close up the case. Now to do that, I'm gonna make a sliding window that goes on the front of that. The first thing I have to do is cut down the same acrylic into a big window that'll go on the front, and then cut some more of that trim that I showed you earlier to make a 3-sided frame to go around the window. I mitered all 4 pieces of the frame just like the other one, but on these I added an 1/8 of an inch MDF piece on the back, except that it doesn't go all the way to the edge. I've got a small overhang here, and that is so that I can accept the piece of clear acrylic to go behind it and be locked in place. I'm gonna put 3 sides of this frame onto the door, and the 4th one will be attached to the plastic so I can slide it in and out to open and close the case. It is kind of tough to glue acrylic to other things. I'm gonna use E6000 for this. It's a great adhesive for attaching pretty much anything to anything else. I scuffed up the surface a little bit so it'll grab. I'm gonna put a bead here, stick the thing down, and then clamp it, and then it'll probably take, I don't know, 15 or 20 hours to really dry. The window is all done, but before we slide it in and cover up the case, we've got to get out my old figures and fill it up. Now I'm the first to admit that this is not something a lot of people are probably going to want to do. It's definitely a Bob type project, but I really like the fact that I get to look at my collection. And no matter what it is that you have that you want to look at, you could build a case like this into the door to show it off. I think the more important thing is that your home is for you, and you can make every single part of it work for you, including doors. Either way, I hope this gave you some cool ideas for some future project. Thanks for watching. Now it's time for bloopers. And the first thing we need to do is cut a hole in my door. And this stuff is thick enough that I should be able to cut a, dang it, wow. So I'm gonna use some 1/4-inch LED, I'm gonna cut some strips, and the reason that I'm using 1/4 inch,